Welcome to the Brill interviews with authors and editors. My name is Helene Palman, Marketing Manager at Brill, and I'm sitting here with Sabine Schmidtke, Professor of Islamic Intellectual History at the Institute of Advanced Study at Princeton. Sabine is a researcher in the field of the Islamicate world with a special focus on the interaction between Islam, Christianity and Judaism. She's the founding editor of Brill's journal, Intellectual History of the Islamicate World. She is the co-author of a volume about Ibn Hazm, and she is the co-editor of a forthcoming volume with Brill about Yemeni manuscripts, and we're very happy that she's on the board of a new series about Biblia Arabica, in which 3 new volumes will come out next year. So welcome, Sabine.
Thanks very much, Helene. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Of course, we also always want to know, how did you become interested in Islamic studies?
Well, I don't think there is a simple answer. I think at the beginning of when I had to decide what I want to do, there was simply curiosity. So back in Germany, the high school I attended was a typical traditional German gymnasium. So we started with Latin and then had Greek, and at some stage we also had English. So that gave me already from the very beginning an interest in philology and languages, and I was very fortunate to have a wonderful teacher of Greek who not only taught us Greek but also how to analyze text. And so I got an idea of what research could be about when you work with text. So when high school was over, I was thinking what to do, and it was pretty clear to me that I do want to take up some languages. Of course, I wanted new languages, not simply continue with Latin and Greek that I had done at school. And so I decided to go for Hebrew and Arabic, and very soon I switched to the Hebrew University to do my undergraduate studies, and there I also added Persian. And I studied with, was very fortunate to be able to study with Shaket, who introduced me to various layers of Persian, Middle Persian, Avesta, etc. I forgot most of it by now, but it was a fascinating time, and it really gave me a new approach also to languages.
It's really nice, yeah. That's how it started as a young scholar, and then progressing to do a PhD. And
yes, but there were many, of course, stages in between, because as I think it's typical for someone being new in Islamic studies, I thought at the time that I'm interested mostly in modern times, and I focused mostly on Middle Eastern studies, only to find out that was actually only in London, where I went after the BA to do an MA program, that I'm really a medievalist. And at the time in London I decided that I wanted to do a PhD on Kalam and turn to the Shi'i tradition, and this is then when I went to Oxford to work with Wilfred Mardelon, who was my PhD supervisor. And that was the best decision I could have taken.
And then afterwards you did a little turn in your career. You didn't follow on research, but you ended the diplomatic service.
Yes, indeed.
How has that shaped you as a researcher? Has it shaped you or changed your view on academics?
Well, certainly it has. I mean, first of all, at the time, I was rather young when I finished my PhD, and I was uncertain what to do. So I did have an offer to continue in a postdoc program. But I wasn't certain at all at the time that I want to continue in academia and research, and I simply wanted to test out something else. So I applied to the German Foreign Service, and I was accepted. Did the 2-year training, served on several desks, on the Middle Eastern desk, on the public relations desk, and my last posting was on the NATO desk. It was during the Kosovo War. But then I found out after 8 years that what I really want to do in life is research. And so this is why I quit the service and then entered into research. But then, of course, it has been a very interesting time simply to be exposed to an entirely different world. I mean, the world of foreign policy, the world of ministries, entirely different kind of people, considerations that are being made, decisions that are taken. I mean, it's an entirely different world, and I was really fortunate to experience this, and it definitely has influenced my own work, or the way I look at my work, mostly in the sense that it gives me a heightened understanding of the responsibility that we bear as researchers, because whatever we do, whatever we publish, even if we work on the Middle Ages, on medieval contexts, it does have an implication on how certain parts of the world are being seen. And at the end of the day, although we mostly publish in scholarly fora of publication, it does have an impact on what the wider public thinks about certain contexts at the end of the day. And this is why we have a huge responsibility that we should really take up also. And this is something I really became very much aware of during my time at the Foreign Office.
Yeah. When you got back into research in the academic world, have you seen changes in the field? Or what kind of changes have you seen in the field?
Well, I think over the past 10, 15 or 20 years, the field has changed tremendously in many respects. I mean, first of all, the field is much larger than it had been 20, 30 years ago. I mean, before the time I started. And it's far more diversified than it has been. I mean, my own teacher, Wilfred Madelung, he is still one of the very last generations of people who you feel they command the entire field. It's no longer the case. I mean, each one of us is specialized in one or several areas of research, and simply the wealth of material that we are exposed to, it's impossible to have a command on everything. So there is certainly the strong tendency towards diversification, which is also visible in the proliferation of numbers of encyclopedia. I mean, Brill has, I think, by now 2 or 3 encyclopedias or more even on the Islamic world, as have many other publishers. And there's certainly room for it because, I mean, the development of the field. If you look at the number of, and not only the number, also the directions of journals that you have in the field. So, I mean, diversification is certainly one of the most visible developments that we have, and I would assume that this is something that will very much continue over the coming years. Another change that I see, and that is to some extent very much related to the diversification or the need for diversification, is the digitization that we have, which of course has implications in many respects, but one of the things that is absolutely visible is that because of digitization we are nowadays in the position that we have relatively easy access to manuscripts from all over the world. And we are all nowadays aware that there are masses of materials out there that no one has ever looked at, that still need to be studied. Of course, I mean, some areas have been studied better than others, but if you think, for instance, of post-Avicenna philosophy, there's such a wealth of material in the libraries of Iran, Turkey, India. I mean, hardly anyone goes there and looks in a systematic fashion what's there. That will certainly take a couple of additional decades until this kind of material is being unearthed. An interesting impact of digitization and the growing awareness of the wealth of material that has not been studied so far is that philology is again on the rise, which is a very positive development in my view. Of course, up until today, there is only a very small fraction of materials, Islamic materials, Arabic materials, Persian materials, that have been edited in any proper way. I mean, if you think of people like Ibn Sina, Ghazali, we don't have any critical edition of any of their works, of Fakhruddin Razi. And this is certainly something that is increasingly being done, and I'm very glad to see that also the publishers are taking this up. I mean, Brill, for instance, 20 years ago you couldn't come with an edition to Brill. Nowadays, you publish quite a number of critical editions, and I think they do sell because people know acknowledge the value of new textual materials and having them edited in a very proper way. So philology is certainly again on the rise, this being a result of partly of digitization. Another important development is internationalization. I mean, the field is far more international than it has been. People are meeting much more regularly than has been before. This is also thanks, of course, to social media, but it's also any conference you visit nowadays. I mean, there's a good amount of people from nearly all regions of the world being there, being present there. And most definitely, nowadays, you simply cannot ignore in any given field what is being published in the Arab world, what is being published in Iran, as of course, I mean, scholars from the Middle East have to be aware of what's happening in Europe, and very often they are in Europe and North America. And we are more and more becoming one big family, not always of one opinion, of scholarship that really is working more or less together in the same fields and very often on the same projects. Which again leads me to another development that I see in research more generally in the humanities, but also in Islamic studies, is that collaborative research is increasingly gaining in importance. And I think this is a very good thing, because many of the fields, many of the tasks that are laying still ahead of us simply cannot be achieved by just one person. And it's not good enough that each one of us sits in his or her own room writing articles, writing books, but there are things that are so huge that only groups of scholars can really address these issues. And this is increasingly being done, and I think this is a wonderful development. Certainly, one of the important things that also needs to be mentioned is methodology and the advances that we have in a large number of methodological issues. This partly being the result, especially you can see this in American academia, that very often you don't have Near Eastern Studies departments, but very often these are part of historical departments and anthropological departments. So that you have this very natural exchange with scholars working on similar questions, but on different regions of the world. So that the question of methodology has developed tremendously over the past 20, 30 years in a very natural way, I would say. And this is certainly very much contributing to the quality of work that is being done.
So then I have a final question for you, Sabine, because you have been working on both sides of the world almost that deals with a lot of these in this Islamic intellectual history field, both in Europe and the United States. And what are the differences that you see, and how do these differences have their reflection on the research in the academic field?
Well, first of all, yes, I mean, I must say that I feel fortunate that I have been able to work both in Europe as well as in the United States in various locations, and extremely, of course, fortunate to have now been offered the position and having appointed for the position at the Institute for Advanced Studies, which is just a unique institution in terms of research. Comparing, I mean, let's start differently. When I was in Europe, I was always looking for opportunities to come to the United States for limited periods of time to work here, simply because the possibilities in the United States as compared to Europe are so much better, certainly in terms of libraries. I mean, there is nothing like the Widener Library in Harvard or the Firestone Library in Princeton. We don't have this kind of libraries in Germany, and in fact we don't have them in Europe. In addition to that, we don't have an interlibrary loan system that works all over Europe, so wherever you are stuck also with what is available in any given country. If you know it's in the British Library, it doesn't help you much. This is entirely different here, and I mean, we need books, we need publications in order to do our work, and that is just marvelous here in the United States. On the other hand, there is one development that I see where Europe is advancing faster and in a better direction than the United States, and that is a point I raised before. This is funding for collaborative research. In the United States, as it seems to me, there's hardly any possibility to get funding for humanities, and there seems to be less of an awareness that the direction is really going towards collaborative projects, which simply cost a lot. But they're also very rewarding, also for the funding agencies, because the output is so much higher than the output of any given isolated scholar. But there are simply no provisions for in North America. And I think this is something funding agencies like the National Endowment for the Humanities and others should really look into very closely and think seriously what to do about this, especially if you look at the advantages of or the advances of the European Research Council, which is now entering the third round with Horizon 2020. I mean, the results we see up until now are amazing, and all of them really being the results of groups working on any given topic, and most of them really large topics that couldn't be tackled by just one person. And I think there should be something equivalent in the United States, because if you think, I mean, if the ERC continues funding research as it is right now, I mean, of course you never know what's happening to the economy, there will be a difference in the state of research in the United States and Europe 10 years from now. And I think it's something the United States should really think of what to do to keep up a similar level of funding opportunities here.
Interesting, yeah. So you're trying to use best parts of both worlds, and you travel forth and back, and trying to also bridging the gap between the opportunities that you are presented and trying to opening them up, maybe in future, also here in the States or otherwise.
Yeah, but I'm not traveling forth and back. I'm here now.
Yeah,
I'm based now in the United States.
Yeah.
So I'm no longer in Europe. So I'm no longer profiting from any funding agencies that are in Europe. I'm no longer eligible to profit from any of that. But and of course, my interest is now to support the American academic scene to the extent possible, because I'm here and I'm very fortunate to be here. But this is certainly something, I mean, that would be my message to really American funding agencies, that there is a gap, and it's a serious gap, and it should be filled.
Yeah, we've noted it.
For the good of research.
For the good of research. And I think that's a good ending to this interview. Thank you very much, Sabine.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yes,
Thank you.
and we'll be in touch. And we'll hear more from you.
Thank you.
Thank you.